for joining us for Law in the Library. I'm your host, Robert Reeders. The Alachua County Library District and Three Rivers Legal Services have partnered for over 10 years on the Law in the Library series. Three Rivers Legal Services is an LSC that has provided free civil legal services since 1978. They have offices in Gainesville, Fernandina Beach, Jacksonville, and Lake City, and provide assistance on domestic violence, family law, housing landlord-tenant issues, foreclosure defense, money and debt, veterans issues, reconciliation and expungement, elder law, hurricane disaster and assistance, and public benefits. Their telephone number is 352-372-0519, and their website is https://www.trls.org. Today's presentation is on roofing scams and issues, presented by Kevin Rabin, the Litigation Director for Three Rivers Legal Services in Gainesville, Florida. Kevin has worked for both Three Rivers Legal Services and Jacksonville Area Legal Aid, serving the communities of North Central Florida for the past 10 years. He focused primarily on rental housing, both private and subsidized, fair housing, and consumer law prior to becoming Litigation Director, and has experience in estate planning and probate, family law, domestic and sexual violence injunctions for protection, and public benefits. He has litigated hundreds of eviction, debt collection, foreclosure, and consumer protection suits to completion, and currently serves as a co-chair of the Florida Housing Umbrella Corps. He has participated in multiple amicus curiae briefs filed in federal and state appellate courts related to housing programs and fair housing rights, including Fox First Gains, before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. He has presented to landlords, tenants, public housing authorities, nonprofits, and public officials regarding a wide variety of housing-related topics, including preservation of existing low-income rental housing and tenants' rights. He graduated from the University of Florida Levin College of Law, cum laude, in 2013. And now I'll turn over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and present Law in the Library. It's always a pleasure. It's been quite a few years since I last was a presenter. So I'm excited to present this month on how to avoid roofing scams and other forms of roofing exploitation. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I usually am not a big fan of the PowerPoint, but I think this will be a helpful one for all of us to have as we go along. So bear with me as I move things around. All right, so Robert already did my introduction, so I can skip my lovely spiel about myself. But with roofing scams, I think the best place to start is identifying why we see them so commonly in Florida. One of the biggest reasons is because most people's biggest asset that they hold is their home. The most equity or financial investment that most families in America have is in the home that they live in, own, and maintain. And because of the equity, the amount of money and value that people have in their homes, it is a ripe target for predators. I always like the illustration of some hungry sharks because that's really an apt illustration of what these people are. They are sharks. They are going to target the people who have the most equity and are in the most vulnerable situation. That is their prey. That is exactly why roofing scams have become such a prevalent factor in our state. So again, I think the easy illustration here is first, again, they're targeting people with equity, right? They're not targeting renters with roofing scams. Quite obviously, renters don't own their homes. They're not exactly a useful target. But for homeowners, they're going to target the people who are years into ownership. Not typically targeting people a couple years after purchasing their home. Somebody who purchased their home in 2021 may not have the equity that these predators are really looking for. More commonly, they are going to be looking at historic homeowners, and in many instances, looking for homeowners who've acquired their homes through heirs property, a probate that transfers the home's ownership from one generation to the next. These are very ripe targets. They also will target people who lack a great degree of financial literacy, because the less information they think the homeowner has, the more that they can try to exploit them. So again, keep in mind that the people that they're hunting down are going to be the people who are least likely to know where to turn. And we hope that this presentation can help give some additional pointers, tips, and what to watch out for to avoid becoming the prey of one of these predators. As much as I would like to say that roofing fraud being illegal is a cure-all that would stop all of the roofing scams in our state from being effective, the sad truth is the law has limits. And unfortunately, with roofing fraud and roofing scams, many of the actors that do these kinds of fraud and scams are using parts of the law that are favorable to them. Among other things, in Florida, all contractors who perform work on a home have a right to repayment, right? They helped make sure that the structure is repaired and substantially rehabilitated or improved. And the way that they get the right to secure payment in the event that a homeowner just decides to stiff them and not pay them anything is to impose a lien against the home. Now, the law recognizes this because good contractors deserve to be paid for their services. However, scam artists will use that same right in order to collect and use and effectuate a scam. They try to avoid the bad parts of the law that they don't like, for example, unfair or deceptive acts and practice regulations that prohibit what they do. But at the same time, it's worth it to remember that roofing fraud is particularly hard because it does float in the gray area of the law, that area between what is legal and what is illegal or prohibited. The other thing that makes it really hard to address is that oftentimes these contracts take a lot of time to unwind, even if you go through a legal system to challenge them. It can also be very dangerous because the liens that are imposed against a home can lead to other forms of lawsuits, like a foreclosure action or other types of action to further the lien that can make it much more difficult to maintain the home and try to make it more difficult to undo the harm or the scam's cause. So one of the biggest things that we'll be talking about today is just that an old bit of wisdom is always important to keep in mind. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The best way to avoid a roofing scam is to identify it, that it's happening to you right before it occurs, and to avoid it entirely. So we'll be talking about who and when to watch out for these scams. So again, that who is really the first part. Who are the predators who are targeting homeowners with roofing scams? Now, I'll identify the biggest set of actors first because they're the ones that we at Three Rivers Legal Services see most commonly. And these are door-to-door solicitors, or people who are trying to get face-to-face meetings with homeowners. Now, it's 2024. We're getting close to 2025. I think most people would recognize that there's not a lot of business that is still conducted door to door. There's just not a lot of folks who show up knocking on your door trying to sell you things like in the 1950s or 60s. Sadly, one of the biggest groups of people who still do are these kinds of roofing companies that target homeowners and try to apply high pressure sales tactics. So, as you might imagine, when somebody knocks on your door and they tell you, you've got roof damage, we can help. Would you like our help? Some people who are in a really tight financial bind will be, well, convinced maybe this person really does want to help me. And that's when they get their foot in the door. That first step in the door, that first step of engaging the homeowner at their home gives them additional leverage and power over the homeowner. I think we all can recognize that when somebody's intruding on our home, we feel uncomfortable, right? It's part of why we have cameras that can help tell you who's arriving at your home when when you're not there or you can't see them. It's part of why we have doorbells. It's part of why we have all these home security measures because we really don't like when people intrude on our home without our consent. So one thing to keep in mind is that these people who try to intrude on your home and ask and demand your attention are often going to be the people who are engaged in these types of practices. Now, that's not the only way they try to reach you, though. Oftentimes, there will be mailers using U.S. mail. Obviously, it's a very easy way to get access. These will be colorful, splashy. They'll promise a lot of very fancy things, but they're targeted at trying to get you to contact them. You'll also see lawn signs pretty commonly that talk about the work that they're doing in the neighborhood. When they start a job, they're going to put that sign in the homeowner's yard so that drivers who pass by will notice it. Good contractors use this type of marketing too, so that one can be a little hard to ferret out. But always be mindful that if you see it, it just means that that company's doing work there. Doesn't mean that they're good. The other one to keep in mind is robocalls and telemarketing. There are a lot of companies that try to prey on homeowners using robocalls and telemarketing. There are restrictions on how they can do that, but it's important to know that if you get cold called about roof repair, that's a red flag. You should be alert. And one final note about solar and green energy improvements. A lot of those companies will do the same types of activity that I'm talking about. And while roofing isn't necessarily the thing they're coming to talk to you about, if they're talking about solar panels and they're talking about other green energy improvements, they may also try to get you to agree to redo your roof as part of the improvements made. And it's important to know that these types of financial products that are attached to green energy can be really hazardous to homeowners. Green improvements are wonderful to help make sure that our energy independence in the future can be maintained, but they're expensive. And the ways to finance them are often masked and misled. And the companies that offer these products often mislead consumers about what they're going to cost. They'll also be the most likely to deploy fancy technology like tablets and just tell you, just sign here on this tablet and we'll get everything going, without telling you how that signature may be transposed onto documents that you never saw and you never signed. So who are their targets? Well, it's people who are desperate for help. It's people who are in a vulnerable situation. Now, this isn't always somebody who is just having a really tough time, that's lost family, that's lost income from their household. This could also be people who are on fixed forms of income like supplemental security income or Social Security retirement funds or forms of veterans benefits or disability. People who struggle to accommodate unexpected expenses. Those are people who they're going to be targeting. They are also going to use data that they purchase about the census makeup of a community in order to target historically Black communities and other communities of color. This has been a trend we've observed with several different companies in the state of Florida over the last few years, that they target predominantly Black communities, in part because a lot of the communities of color have older homeowners with large chunks of equity, meaning that they are more valuable as a commodity for these scammers to target. And on top of that, as I think we are all aware, a lot of communities of color have some built-in distrust of traditional lending products for very good reasons. So these scam artists can use rightful mistrust of formal banks or other lending systems to try to deceive homeowners into using their even more exploitative forms. So it's just important to know that that is often who they're going to be looking to target. They'll also target people with limited English proficiency or communities that feature immigrants who may not be as familiar with these types of scams. They may not have existed in the country the person immigrated from, or the community itself may be much more open to people coming and talking with you door to door in a way that the United States has moved away from in the more recent years as technology has predominated our lives. And the other big one to knock on is that they will target older people. Older homeowners, again, are the ones that have the most equity. They're going to be more ripe for their abuse and exploitation. So this is just a brief list of buzzwords to keep an eye out for. Some of them are common with other forms of exploitative lending, but the biggest ones I want to talk about is just happen to be in the neighborhood. This is one of the biggest ones that I have even personally seen. I've had people come and knock on my door from these companies and say, we just happen to be in the neighborhood. One thing to make sure you know, they're never just happening to be in the neighborhood. They're either doing work there already, or they have targeted your neighborhood or your home specifically to come and find you. Don't assume that it's just a casual knock on the door. That's not what's happening, and it's going to mislead you. The other thing, especially in the wake of the hurricanes we've had this year, most notably Hurricanes Debbie and Helene, is that they will target and storm chase. A lot of these companies will approach and ask if you had storm damage or did you make a FEMA claim in order to try to solicit or attach themselves to legitimate storm relief that's afforded by state and federal programs. If these people do not have affiliations directly with FEMA, if they can't produce a card that shows that they are working for the federal government, then you shouldn't trust that they are affiliated with those people and they are just trying to chase in the aftermath of the storms. The state of Florida has a hotline specifically if you encounter these people. So if you do encounter them, make sure to alert the Office of the Attorney General. I would also note that they may also use some affiliation with government programs. If that buzzword ever gets used, make sure to ask which one, because the lack of specificity is always going to be fatal. These people don't know actual legitimate federal or state programs that are used to help different communities access low-cost forms of home improvements. They are just using the idea of being with government to make it seem like their business is more legitimate. And finally, really watch out for, we'll get your insurance to pay for it. I think a lot of homeowners misunderstand that their homeowners insurance can just broadly be used to help repair things. That isn't true for the vast majority of policies. And that form of roofing fraud is so pervasive across the state that it's led our legislature to have to take action to redress it. And it's important to keep in mind that if somebody says that to you and they're not from your homeowner's insurance company, then you have roofing scam or a roofing fraud on your hands. I've touched on a few of these already, but it's important just to really kind of break down what they look like. And this illustration that I have here is not meant to be the only version, but it's a very common version that we have seen time and again over the last couple of years. The company rep will knock on a person's door, that door-to-door solicitation I mentioned earlier, and they will assess that storm damage has occurred to the roof. Now, in many of the cases, we've seen that this person has never set foot on the roof. Obviously, I think a lot of homeowners would ask, well, how do you know that if you haven't been up there? And if you were up there without my consent, can you please leave? You know what I mean? There's always going to be that element of how could they possibly know this? Just so everyone is aware, you can't actually assess storm damage accurately from ground level. I think it's pretty apparent to know the full scope of what occurred on the roof. You're going to have to get up there. And importantly, don't let somebody who comes to you and says that you have storm damage just go up on your roof and take a look around. Obviously, if you have storm damage, that's something you need to contact your own roofing company in order to come and assess, usually after they give you an estimate of whether they'll charge for that service or whether they have any charge that they may do later on if you end up selecting them to perform the work. The other thing to remember is that you can often make claims on your insurance before you know the full scope. Your insurance will send out an adjuster, a person from the insurance company, to assess what they believe has occurred. And they're often the best person to talk to first, because once the insurer tells you the scope of what's going on, then you can shop around for people to address what the insurer is willing to pay. These companies go in the opposite. They want to get you hooked with them first, and then they will contact your insurer. And that's the biggest problem, right? A lot of these companies are going to try to get to your insurance company without using you in the middle, because they would rather talk to the insurer, find out what the insurer is willing to pay for, and then try to maximize the amount of money they can extract from your insurance company, often not performing good work in the meantime. But the other alternative that they may engage in is they may try to gouge you as the homeowner. If they know the insurance policy may only pay $4,000, that's not going to cover a full roof replacement. But if they know they can do a full roof replacement and charge the homeowner the remaining $9,000 for that service, that is a prime form of roofing fraud we see. So one of the other things that we often see with these is that they will promise that you will only have to pay your deductible, right? The amount of money you have to pay against the insurance claim you may make for roof repair. The problem is when they say this, the contracts they ask the homeowner to sign often contradict it and say that they will be allowed to charge additional money beyond the amount that the insurance company deductible is. So it's important to just keep an eye on that. And if somebody is saying all you'll have to pay is your own deductible, that's usually a great, just giant red flag warning sign that you're dealing with roofing fraud. Again, like I said, the other big things to watch out for include an incomplete written contract. So most roofing jobs are going to specify the materials to be used, the types of roof, lumber, the types of joints that'll be used, the types of shingles that will be used, and where they're sourced from. It will specify the individual cost of those materials, and it will estimate a labor cost to give the homeowner an idea of how long the project will take, how many laborers will be involved, and what the cost of their labor will be. A lot of the roofing fraud cases we've seen, none of this is specified. And worst, we've seen homeowners who have signed contracts that have these figures fully blank. I cannot, this is the thing that always distresses me the most when I see it. Never sign a contract with blanks. That gives the other party who possesses that contract the ability to fill it in with whatever number they feel like. As you might imagine, this leads to a future day in court in which the parties have to discuss whether those numbers were filled in at the time the contract was signed or not. The best thing you can do as a homeowner, protect yourself. Do not sign something that has blanks in it. I mentioned the assignment of benefits issue earlier too. This is an upfront thing that's also a giant red flag. If the contractor is asking to negotiate directly with your insurer, do not let them do so. You need to always have the pulse on what your homeowner's insurance company is going to be paying for this project. That way you can make sure that you know how much the contractor can agree to be paid. You can also know what your budget is to afford the work that they're prescribing to do. If the insurance company's only approved, again, $4,000 and they're contemplating a full re-roof, those two services, the re-roof and the amount paid, are just not going to match. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Again, I'm going to touch briefly on the green energy issue. One of the ways that that's often financed is through this kind of technocratic version of using your property taxes and assessments to pay it back in lieu of a traditional loan. Some cities and municipalities have this set up where effectively the city will pay and you pay back the city through assessments against your property taxes. They're often sold as if you don't have to actually pay anything over time. It can be a real giant headache and illusion that homeowners wake up to when they realize that their mortgage payments go up because of escrow taxes. They also may realize that if they're paying their property taxes independently, that they've gone up. And these assessments are not restricted by other protections meant to help keep costs down when property values go up. So it's just important to know that those and other high interest lending products can be a huge factor in the companies that come at telling you about all the fancy energy efficient things that they can provide to your home. So again, just breaking down briefly the things you should and should not do. What you should do, read every contract for services, especially around your home, carefully. Take notes as you read, independently, not on the contract itself. Ask questions on any term you don't understand, and demand an answer from the person who's trying to get you to sign the contract. It's their job to explain what they're asking you to sign, and an unwillingness to do so usually is an indication that they are not being honest with you. Again, it's your job as a consumer to ask questions and demand answers. Don't let misdirection or a failure to give an answer allow you to go into a bad contract. It's also important to shop around. Get multiple quotes, especially for something like roof work. You want to shop around and get competitive quotes from different companies to try to see who will do it for the cheapest, but also who will do the best work. Ask other homeowners in your community who they have used and ask them how satisfied they may be with the quality of the work performed. Your neighbors can often give you good tips and will be upfront with this because obviously if they had a bad experience, they're going to want to tell you about it. The other thing to also know is whether you can cancel a deal you've signed. Because this involves work on a home, occasionally some of these loans will come with Truth in Lending Act disclosures and a limited right within a certain period of time, usually no greater than 3 days, to rescind the contract. If you don't see that language in the contract, you may not have the right to take it back after you've signed it. Again, read carefully and don't sign until you know you want to do this deal. Again, research the lender or the company that's trying to do the roof work. If you see bad Google results, if you see Better Business Bureau complaints from other homeowners, if worse yet, if you see a lawsuit from some state agency or the state attorney general's office, run away. Just run away. And again, for those homeowners who are low income, like most of our clients, know that there are programs that you can apply to get no cost home improvements. Now, these programs are in high demand, but there are programs like SHIP, which we'll talk about in a few minutes as well, that can provide needed funding for home repairs that does not require the homeowner to pay anything up front and can be forgiven over a period of time if the homeowner maintains that home as their primary residence, usually a duration of no greater than 10 years. So quickly, don't sign contracts without understanding what they say, or worse yet, with blanks in them. Don't let other people pressure you into signing a contract, especially if they're right there with you at your door. And just don't misrepresent what you can actually afford. As sad as it is, sometimes a consumer is going to agree to pay something they know they can't afford. There are worse things in the world than putting yourself in a compromised financial position. And with your home, if you lose it, things only get worse. So just be careful. Again, when we're talking about who to trust, this is not meant to be a comprehensive list, but it's to give you an idea of where to go. When you're looking for assistance, like I said, with your home repairs, you should always start with your insurance. If it really happened because of a storm, if after Hurricane Helene you started getting water leaks, contact your insurance company first, take photographs, get in touch with them, and try to work through things with them first. If you don't have insurance or your insurance company says they can't cover your loss, then if you're still within the window to do so, you would make a claim with FEMA, with the Federal Emergency Management Administration, in order to try to get some assistance that way. Now, again, if you need to get money to borrow to make repairs to your home, go through major financial institutions. They're not always the best, but they are going to be upfront with you in disclosing what the costs are, how much interest you'll pay, because they are highly regulated. And again, you can shop around and look for other forms of financing, competing rates, and try to find the best rate that would work. I mentioned a moment ago, there are other programs that are state, local, and federally backed. There's a whole list of them. But the most important thing to know is you need to go and ask the city, the county, Alachua County, or other state offices that help with these programs. Go directly to them. Look on their websites with the .gov signature to make sure you're looking at the right places, and try to track down those programs directly, because your direct outreach to them will help ensure you know you're dealing with the right people. And the other thing is, again, look for licensed businesses that are also bonded and insured. If you're dealing with a roofing contractor in particular, it's not an always guarantee. But if you ask if they're licensed, bonded, and insured, and they can provide you evidence of all three things, you know that at least if something goes wrong, there will be the ability to hold that company accountable. So who should you avoid? The kind of people who will put an axe in your back. Those door-to-door solicitors. I keep returning to it because they are the ones. Be careful, watch out for them. And again, like I mentioned, the people who refuse to answer the questions you may ask or try to pressure you into signing something very quickly. Also, again, watch out for unlicensed companies or ones that are running through one license that's not connected to their business. For example, if their name is Home Repairs LLC, but the license is connected to Home Ventures of the Future Corp., then you might have a concern that this company is unlawfully using a license of another affiliated company. It can just be a bit of a warning sign. Just briefly, again, because the types of roofing can help address them, I just wanted to run down briefly. Know that there are several different laws that can help. Many are federal acts that deal with real estate related transactions, like the Fair Housing Act, which prevents discriminatory lending practices or home solicitation practices. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, very similar. The Truth in Lending Act I mentioned a moment ago is for any kind of financing that attaches to homes, as well as debt collection practice laws and the Florida Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Among other things, that law just says if it's unfair, if it's unfair in the commission of any trade or practice, it may be unlawful. So it's important to know there are things that you can do if you find yourself the victim of roofing fraud. And finally, I just would point out that there are other people who could help with these laws beyond nonprofit legal services like ours. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a database on complaints. You can look and see if any of these roofing companies you might be looking at have had complaints filed against them. The FTC, HUD, and the Office of Attorney General of the state of Florida also do enforcement in this arena. The other thing is, again, there are many different nonprofit legal service agencies that operate in our community. We would really stress trying to contact all of us in order to try to see if any of us can help. And finally, know that there is a private system of attorneys through what is known as the National Association of Consumer Advocates. This is a group that tightly controls its membership and ensures that only the private attorneys who help with consumer protection, who help consumers and homeowners fight back against these scams, are members of this organization. Those private attorneys sometimes do charge for services, but they are fantastic and well-respected members of the bar who can help. And I've provided the link there to how you can locate a NACA-affiliated attorney in the state of Florida and here in Alachua County. So again, we'll wrap up the presentation for today, but I wanted to thank the Alachua County Library District again for allowing us to be here and present on roofing scams. Again, like I said at the beginning, I really hope this helps everyone avoid scams and fraud. Use your best judgment, use common sense. If it feels like somebody's pressuring you, if it feels like somebody's offering you something too good to be true, it probably is a good opportunity to take a step back and contact somebody to try to make sure that you don't find yourself the victim. We thank you guys again for paying attention, and we hope to not see you as a victim of roofing fraud. But if you are, feel free to reach out and contact us.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much for the great information. And we want to thank our viewers for tuning in for our talk today. Let everybody know our next Law in the Library episode will premiere on Wednesday, January 8th at 5:30. Previous episodes of Law in the Library are available on the library's website at www.aclib.us/law-library. And with that, I want to thank you for tuning in. See you next time.